Detroit is another example of people trying to take away from those who have worked hard, voted right, and counted efficiently. Our eternal thanks for the vast number of workers and volunteers who risked their very lives during the COVID-19 period to count the votes, endure the insults, harassment, and intimidation by Trump operatives seeking to invade their space. The Republican representatives on the Wayne County Board of Elections canvassers by their stalling rejection of the will of the people until folks from around the city weighed in with their objections are a case in point. This is the deadly political virus attacking our election process. Monica Palmer and William Hartman stood in the doorway attempting to block democracy from finding its way. This occurred for several hours, promoting outrage and legitimate dissent. It should not take such actions on the part of the people to get our public officials to adhere to the express will and intent of the people. Donald Trump lost the general election by nearly 6 million votes. He has lost the Electoral College in what he called a landslide for himself in 2016 by 306 to 232 electors in 2020 to President-elect Joe Biden. Yet we see an onslaught of attacks from Republican operatives from state to state trying to turn back the results and reverse history. This will not work. Michigan turned out and fired Donald Trump in 2020. The people corrected the error of 2016. He lost Michigan by almost 4 times the amount he won in the last election. Now the virus is spreading. It spread from the attack on the post office by Commissioner Louis DeJoy, attempting to slow down and stop the vote. It spread by President Donald Trump, calling it a rigged election, voter fraud, and telling his followers to not trust the mail-in ballots. Go to the polls on election day and cast your ballot. It spread by gerrymandering and long lines and the elimination of drop boxes in cities and counties around the country. This virus has taken effect by a president refusing to accept the outcome of the election unless he wins. Now it has even infected the counting and certification process. It is being spread as operatives do not want to certify the election. Lawsuits are being filed all over the country by a grifter from New York, formerly known as America's mayor. He can now be described as democracy's nightmare. As the lawsuits are being tossed out and withdrawn by Trump's own lawyers, one by one, from Michigan to Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Georgia, these operatives have become even more desperate. Senator Lindsey Graham of the Senate Judiciary Committee from South Carolina, not Georgia, has called the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to see if he can eliminate legal ballots on the basis of a lack of so-called signature matches. Mr. Raffensperger, no Biden-Harris supporter, who also gave Stacey Abrams election challenges in her bid to become Georgia's first African-American and woman governor, dismissed his unethical and immoral inquiry as being out of order. This is the same Graham who said in 2016, "I have every confidence in our election system. If Trump loses, it will not be because the system is rigged, but because he failed as a candidate." This infectious disease continues to spread as Trump and his allies refuse to acknowledge and accept Joe Biden as the president-elect. They have refused him the normal access of information and finances expected during a normal transition of power. Now even the head of Homeland Security of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Chris Krebs, has become a victim of this virus as he was fired for simply telling the truth. His department declared the November 3rd election was the most secure in American history. There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. To many, one might say, if this were a different nation, we would be witnessing a political coup, as persons in the highest office of the land are being fired, military officers are being discharged, and the head of the nation is refusing to acknowledge his successor. Do the people need the intervention of the United Nations in our own nation? Well, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. The election canvassers must stand up for the truth. The truth is some come to the election certification process with a bias. On the Facebook page of William Hartman, one can see pictures of former President Barack Obama being portrayed as a pirate, thief, and a Muslim, even though he is a devout Christian. This reflects the disdain Mr. Hartman has for the first African-American president. One must ask how such people can be allowed to serve on these most important boards. As we move forward on the final certification, we must be very careful and concerned about their conclusion. It appears that some are simply looking for a solution that is in search of a problem. Perhaps the state of Michigan needs to look at the post of all of those engaged in the certification of democracy and who do not stand on the state of hypocrisy. The people have spoken. The late Congressman John Lewis said, "Your vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have to create the most perfect union. We in the city of Detroit do not ever intend to relinquish our right to cast our vote. We expect our votes that we cast to be counted and certified. This is the ultimate vaccine to political pandemic of the many Republicans that are currently on the scene." Now I'm going to ask Mayor Duggan if he would make his statement and his remarks. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Reverend Anthony, for organizing this today, and thank you for your leadership yesterday, where the public, just real people, made themselves heard, because American democracy cracked last night, but it didn't break. But we are seeing a real threat to everything we believe in. The whole principle of the Constitution is one person, one vote. Everybody's vote counts the same. But what you are seeing in this country right now is an effort to say we only want to count the votes of people who agree with us. And I want to take a minute to discuss the out-of-balance precincts, which was the big subject yesterday that was the pretext. And the idea that the out-of-balance precincts reflects any problem with the voting is utter nonsense. Here's what it means. At the end of the night, you add up the number of people who are recorded in the poll book as having voted and the number of ballots, and they should match. If they're off by one, that's called an out-of-balance precinct, which is what they were discussing yesterday. How does that happen? In most cases, on the absentee side, it happens because the envelopes come in, somebody has a bar scanner, they scan the person's name on the envelope, and then they put the ballot through the machine. They may think the scanner caught the person's name, but if it didn't and doesn't record, at the end of the night, you could have 541 ballots and 540 scanned names. It just means the bar scanner missed. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong. At the poll, the most likely case is you spoil your ballot, you go up to the clerk, they give you a new one, and they void the old one. The clerk's supposed to write down that they issued a new ballot. But if they forget to do that, at the end of the night, it'll show 388 ballots issued, 387 counted. That's out of balance. It is not any indication of any kind of fraud in the voting process. And the total number of out-of-balance counts last night was 357 in a city that had 250,000 votes. In other words, 99.9% was done correctly. Now, protections are there for a reason. If the presidential election in Michigan was decided by 100 votes, it would have made sense in the canvass to audit those 300. It might have changed the outcome. But Michigan was decided by 145,000 votes. And they knew that there was no chance it had a material effect on the outcome. The behavior yesterday was for no reason except to try to discredit the election and undo the votes. And we've seen it this year. The Trump strategy was legal strategies across this country. First, make it hard for people they don't think are going to vote for them, largely African American, make it hard to be registered. If you get registered but you're fearful of COVID, particularly the fact that the black community is dying from COVID at a much higher rate than Caucasians, but we will make it hard for you to vote by mail. And if you do vote, they now say, we're going to make it hard to count your vote. We're going to accuse you of fraud, and we're going to do everything to disrupt it. That is not democracy, and it's impossible to overlook the racial element of this. Look at the swing from a 10,000 vote Trump win 4 years ago to 145,000 vote Biden win. The largest area swing, Oakland County, swung 54,000 votes. The second largest area, suburbs of Wayne County, swung 35,000 votes. More than half of the swing was in just the suburbs there. But when they realized on Wednesday, as the votes were coming in and Trump was going to lose Michigan, they didn't send their Republicans to pound on windows at the clerk's office in Birmingham or Farmington or Grosse Pointe saying stop the vote, even though that's where they were losing. They played to people's worst racial prejudices and went down to the city of Detroit where professional people, our neighbors, were just doing their job, counting ballots, where plenty of Republican challengers were in the room, started pounding on the windows, tried to intimidate the workers by videotaping them and the like. And this is what is so aggravating. We've had 3 lawsuits that have been ruled on by 5 courts, 3 trial courts and 2 courts of appeals. Not one of those 5 courts has found a shred of truth to the Republicans' claim of fraud in the city of Detroit. 2 weeks later, they have not a single Detroiter who they can point to as voted who wasn't eligible to vote. Not one. 5 courts in a row have said their claims are not credible, and yet they persist in what they are trying to do. And you could see the racism in the behavior last night. Out of balance precincts happen everywhere. In fact, there were 30 suburbs with out of balance precincts. These kind of human errors happen. And yet you heard Monica Palmer, the chair of the board, say she was prepared to certify every community except Detroit. She was ready to certify 30 largely white communities with out-of-balance precincts, but only in Detroit, where they didn't vote the way she wanted, did she attempt to hold up the certification. I don't begin to know how to thank the people who spoke up, because the ultimate hypocrisy of this makes me so angry. 4 years ago, the clerk's office had far more out-of-balance precincts in 2016 than in 2020. And there was only a 10,000 vote margin in the state. 4 years ago, the Republicans on the Board of Canvassers had no problem whatever certifying the count with the out-of-balance precincts because they know it's an inconsequential number of votes. It doesn't change the outcome. But this year, all of a sudden, when the vote didn't go their way, they say, we're not going to count them. The people who got on last night, some very eloquent people, Reverend Anthony, you expect to be eloquent, but I was pretty proud of a lot of citizens who spoke out at the way their votes were being canceled, and I think ultimately convinced that board to reverse themselves. But make no mistake, there is still one more chance to cancel democracy in the state of Michigan. We have a state of Michigan Board of Canvassers, and if the Trump campaign tries the same kind of tactics there as we saw in Wayne County, the votes of the people of this state are still at risk. So I would say to the people of Detroit and the people of Michigan, you need to be vigilant. You need to be online, paying attention to what the State Board of Canvassers does. At this point, there is absolutely no excuse for anything except certification. But of course, we've seen behavior before that violates our rights. And so we're going to stay vigilant every step of the way. And with that, I'll turn it back to Reverend Anthony.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's pause now to see if anyone has any questions. Ken.
Reverend Anthony, what role do you think, and for Mayor Duggan as well, what role do you think that activists on the Zoom call last night played? I mean, Mayor Duggan just talked about this. I mean, I as a reporter, I got like emails and text messages about, this upcoming canvassing meeting. I think there was a lot of organizing going into that call. Lots of people on the call, and I just want to get thoughts from both of y'all about the role you thought that the activists played.
I think it played a major difference. The people will not be rejected, and the people, once united, cannot be defeated. I think that the voices on the Zoom call, and keep in mind, originally there was supposed to be 100, then they had to expand it to 300, then they had to expand it again because of the number of people that were checking in to be a part of that. Everybody still didn't get a chance to express themselves, but enough people expressed themselves so that the canvassers got the message. And I think that for those who did not get a chance to express themselves, hopefully something that was said did express your thinking. But for those who were on it, they were clear, they were direct, it was unfiltered, and people really understood that. That's the kind of vigilance that is needed in a democracy. That's what democracy is all about. And you could see and feel the resentment of the people who were on the call because we worked hard. People stood in line. People voted early. People sent folk down to the TCF Center who were there. I had people to call. We had people at the TCF Center. My daughter was at the TCF Center. She saw the people invading the center, banging on the windows, coming down there, sitting in the middle of the aisles, invading their space, not wearing face masks, talking all the stuff that they were talking, threatening to sue people and to intimidate them. That was on purpose. And it's only done in black communities. As the mayor indicated, it was not done in Oakland County, not done in Macomb County, was not done in the Upper Peninsula. Where was it done? In Detroit, in Wayne County. Where is it being done? In Philadelphia, in Milwaukee, in Atlanta. It's being done in black cities across the country. It's all right if we win, count the votes. It's not all right if we're not winning, stop the votes. You can't have it both ways. Democracy had its day, and on January the 20th, no matter what these people try to do, on January the 20th, at 12 o'clock, a man by the name of Joe Biden will place his left hand on the Bible, and he'll raise his right hand before the nation and take an oath to become the 46th president of these United States of America. And a woman by the name of Kamala Harris will become the first black woman, the first woman of Asian Indian descent to become the vice president of the United States of America. Now run and tell that.
Mr. Mayor, any thoughts on the question of
You know,
of activists last night?
I can't improve on that. There's no doubt. And while there was some organization, I can tell you it exploded organically after we got the message that they had voted not to certify. I think that came as a shock to a lot of people. If you know this process, Board of Canvassers, it's a ministerial job. Your job is to count the numbers and pass them on. To vote not to count is unbelievable. But the point I'd make when Reverend Anthony talks about Atlanta and Philadelphia and Milwaukee, the Trump administration has targeted the black communities. But in every one of those states, there was a huge shift in the suburban vote outside of Philadelphia, outside of Milwaukee, outside of Atlanta, that shifted away from Trump and to Joe Biden. And yet you do not hear the Trump folks attacking the largely female suburbanites who drove those shifts. And we all know the reason behind that.
Mayorship.
Right here. It's in the company. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of impact do you think this is going to have with the African American community and the Republican Party going forward?
I think it's very clear that it is not a party of inclusion, but of exclusion. The proof is in the pudding. You know, let me just say this, because a lot of people often talk about the fact that, you know, black people are democratic and Democrats take them for granted and the Republicans don't take them at all. It is about policy. It's about policy. We look for those in the Republican Party to come up with policy that reflects who we are. What's your policy on health care? What's your policy on simply wearing a mask? What's your policy on income equity? What's your policy on education? What's your policy on police reform? What's your policy? If you got the policy, then we can find the practice of voting for folk who support policy. But when you look at the Republicans and their policies, I'm not talking about their personalities, I'm talking about their policies. They don't match up with the interests of the African American community. Years ago, they talked about doing an autopsy. Well, they must have failed with the autopsy. The body is still dead because there's no life as relates to bringing in African American folk or minorities. Why would you join something that considers African nations as whole countries, black athletes as SOBs, black women as unintelligent and not prepared and less than? The first African American woman to be vice president-elect, you can't even acknowledge that. I mean, why would we join that? Why would we support the fact that you can't even call or say that black lives matter? You can't even say that. And so it's about policy. So this certainly does not help the party of Lincoln. If you're the party of Lincoln, then act like it. If you want to claim that Lincoln freed the slaves, which he did not do, not to help a black folk, i.e. Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and so many others, if you are that party, then act like it. Open up access. Don't reduce the vote, increase it. The bottom line is, when they decrease the vote and suppress it, they decrease and suppress themselves. Republicans traditionally have voted more by absentee than Democrats have. And so you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. So it does not help, it hurts.
Reverend, you mentioned the racist posts that were found, pretty alarming posts on social media by some of the canvassers, board of canvassers. Any idea why they were kept on that board after making those kind of statements?
That's a question, Simon. I have no idea. To me, once you see that, you see where the person is coming from. He portrays what he thinks. He's telling you, he's telegraphing, he's sending you a fax, he's sending you an email, he's sending you all the things that you need to communicate. That I'm not with that kind of a program. This is me, y'all. Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That comes out of his heart. The pictures of Barack Obama as a pirate, as a thief, as somebody you cannot trust, as a Muslim. Nothing wrong with being a Muslim, by the way. But I'm simply saying that you want to characterize him as that when he is a devout Christian. It's truly trying to distort and mangle the impression of who these people really are. It shows that you're a person, Mayor.
In light of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers vote, there is no shred of legal authority for the State Board of Canvassers to not certify the vote. So if they try,